This video is going to cover the installation of these BC Racing coilovers on a Datsun 240Z. But before we install them, we have to unbox them and see what's in here. Okay, so these are the BR series coilovers. The BC Racing part number is D94, followed by other digits to specify exactly what options you want in the kit. This is a full set of 4 for the 70, it says right here, for the 70 to 73 Datsun 240Z. These are the standard height version, not the super low, and they're also equipped with the standard BC Racing springs. Let's take a look. We got some stickers, some brochures, here we have the warranty card and some installation instructions and more stickers. And finally, the product. So these particular coilovers, these are the ones with the standard tops that will bolt directly into the factory strut towers. There is some camber adjustment available. Not much modification to the car is needed to put these in. That's why I chose them. You have your adjustment knob here for your damping and your camber adjustment lock bolts right there. These are labeled. This one's an R for rear. The adjustments are spring preload right here. And then ride height is adjusted with this collar, and that threads this whole coilover shock into this lower collar. So that changes the whole height of the suspension without decreasing spring travel. These particular coilovers require welding to install them, so we'll take a look at that a little bit later. Let's take a look at a front. So here's the FL for front left, has the brake line clip already installed. Once again, 3-bolt top should go right into the factory mounting inside the 240Z engine bay. And the other two, front right, and the other rear one is right there. Also in the box are some adjustment wrenches for the lock collars and an Allen wrench, probably for camber adjustment. So modification to the factory components are needed in order to install these coilovers. Included with the coilovers is this instruction sheet that tells us that the strut housings have to be cut, fronts and rears, leaving a 45mm tube sticking up out of the knuckle. So I went ahead and did that. These are off of my vehicle, 73 Datsun 240Z. This is a front right, and this is a rear left. So these were cut and then sandblasted, so that's why they look gray. So let's see how they fit with the coilovers. This is just one of the rear ones. The rears are not left or right specific, so it doesn't matter which one you grab. Okay, so that's a really good fit on there. The next step would be to weld along here, joining the coilover to the uprights. So that looks pretty good. Take a look at the front. Now the fronts are not rotational specific because the camber plate can spin, or the upper mount, and the brake line clip can also spin. So it doesn't really matter what orientation you weld them to this guy. So let's see here. Okay, this one doesn't fit down flush. Looks like there's some interference right here. There's a nub on this casting. And some grinding will be needed in order to get this coilover to fit flush down onto the knuckle here. So let's grind that and check back a little bit later. Okay, so back from grinding. There's the shape that I had to grind out of this to get it to fit into this little cavity here. Just took a couple minutes with an angle grinder with a flapper sanding disc on it. So now the coilover assembles all the way flush with the casting of the knuckle. Okay, so both front lower sleeves have been ground. They kind of look like that. So next step would be to weld these guys up. Okay, so we're using a TIG welder today to do this, but you could also use a wire feed MIG welder if you'd like. I went ahead and tacked opposite sides of the tube to hold it in place. So I'm going to go ahead and finish weld the rest of it. I will not be able to reach in there to weld, so I'll just do the best I can and see what I can cover, and then we'll see how they look. Okay, so I just finished welding the two fronts. You can see welded all the way around. There was a very small gap right in there that I could not get my TIG torched, but I think it'll be okay. The sandblasted knuckle welded really nicely, no porosity or anything. So these look good, so we're going to let them cool down and then paint them to prevent rusting. And then next we'll move on to the rears. So here's the finished product. The 2-inch hole was widened to make room to access the camber bolts. and it works pretty well. So here we are looking at the rear strut. We have the same issue as we did in the front, where the hole is too small to access the camber adjustments. So like the fronts, we'll enlarge this with a 2-inch hole saw, then possibly add a little bit of grinding to it and see how it turns out. Okay, so after lots of cutting and grinding, it's not pretty, but it works. Okay, everything bolted back together just fine. Looks great. We'll set ride height with this collar here, and spring preload can be set with this one here. Do that later. On lowered cars, especially Datsuns like this, it's always good to install one of these bump steer spacers or roll center correctors, whatever you want to call them. Basically what it does on lowered vehicles is allows the steering arm to keep a good angle so that you don't get steering input when your wheel travels up and down. So that's a good addition to add when putting in coilovers on a lowered vehicle. Now it's time to set the preload and the ride height. So preload is set with this adjustment ring here. This is the lock ring to set that into place. And this ring down here is loosened, and the whole spring assembly can be screwed into this lower housing to adjust the ride height. So right now I'm setting the preload by loosening the spring seat pretty much all the way until the spring is fairly loose. And then I'm gonna go 3 revolutions to preload the spring. That's just a guess number right now, just somewhere to start. I'm going to set all 4 corners of the car like that, and we'll see how it goes. So once that's done, I'm going to lock it into place with the lock ring, and then I will start to adjust ride height using this adjustment here. Okay, so preload is now set, and now I loosened up the ride height collar, and I'm going to start lowering the car by screwing the upper strut into the lower housing. So while I'm doing this, since the car is off the ground, it's actually lifting the whole lower suspension assembly upward, so it takes a lot of effort. So we'll move to the wrenches. So I know I want this to be fairly low, so I'm going to keep going until there's about 1 inch of thread there. That'll be my starting point. When the car's on the ground, I'll decide if I want to go lower or higher. So I've adjusted the ride height to a level I'm pretty happy with. The car's low, but not too low. I still have 18 millimeters of adjustment here if I want to go extremely low, but I don't think that'll be necessary. The car is perfect for street use. It doesn't rub, but it still has a nice low stance. I would say that for most people, the standard height coilover option would be great. The extreme low version, I could only really see that being useful on show cars or other cars where the car is basically sitting on the ground. That's not the case here. Let's take a look at the rears now. Okay, so it's a similar story on the rear suspension. I still have 22 millimeters of adjustment, but I'm not going to be going much lower than this. I'm very happy with the ride height, and overall I'm very happy with the suspension. It's worked really well, very impressed with it. I would highly recommend it to anyone with a 240Z. This is the BC Racing BR Series coilovers.